feel like I need a shower. I've been to Action Park. I didn't have the best time because it was very, very dangerous, and I guess I'm just not a thrill seeker. But I think the biggest reason that I need a shower is aside from the 80s sleaze, and I grew up in the 80s. I don't romanticize the 80s. I can get into that later, but I think the biggest reason I need a shower was because here we have a figure in Mulvihill who, one of those guys who thinks he can get away with everything, and he kind of did, through these sleazy tactics, like just, tiring people out, tiring the state out so they wouldn't just be bothered by him anymore, not being really held accountable for his actions, going, I can do what I want, and I don't care about the law, and it's just unfair, and I am not a fan of unfairness. And then it just gets, more serious because a bunch of people died, and a whole hell of a lot of people got injured at that place, and they didn't have to be. So it's a failure on so many levels. It's a failure of society in the 80s because, you had the Reagan administration and that whole philosophy, I don't need government to tell me what to do. Government's the problem. I can do what I want. And let's let the free market decide. People can make their own decisions. If you're a 5-year-old, it kind of makes sense. It's like, oh, well, you put your hand on the hot stove, you're not going to touch that again. You learn a lesson. And life is a little more complicated than that. It really is when you deal with businesses and when you deal with groups of people, and then you deal with regulations and safeties and how those groups interact, and then you deal with death. Because of deregulation, it's a very serious thing that could have been prevented, and I think it was greatly illustrated with the family of George Larson, who, obviously was in great pain. The mother, it just still carries that grief like his death happened yesterday. And then, the reason behind his death, it wasn't the slide that killed him, it was the rocks that killed him. Well, it was the rocks that killed him because they were placed there after he got thrown off the slide that was there in your park. And I think what probably made me the most angry was, again, just romanticizing it. It's now people my age doing the back in my day, which, I vowed to never do that when I was a kid, even when I was a kid, because I would hate when adults would do that, and I don't do that now, unless I'm joking about it, or unless I'm genuinely telling someone younger, I'm like, hey, this is how it was, without any judgment upon them. But it's always we left at 8 o'clock and we rode our bikes and our parents didn't know where we were and we drank from the hose, and you kids these days, you don't know what it's like to be tough. The problem with that kind of philosophy is that every generation before says that for the current generation, and it's completely invalidating. Some of it isn't true. Some of it is very insulting, and some of it is an insult to progress, is an insult to, maybe we are a little gentler society. Maybe we are now a society who's veering more and more on your feelings, and your feelings matter, and validating those things. And, I'm 44 years old. I was born in 1976. I'm the perfect age of growing up through the 80s. That was my childhood. So, yes, I experienced the going out there and my parents not knowing where I was and riding the bikes all around and no cell phones and going to friends' houses. And yeah, there are pros and cons to each of them. And the key word in this is balance. So I would have loved to have a cell phone, an iPhone or a laptop, or just back when I was a kid, I would be less bored. I was so bored as a kid. And I understand that boredom, some parts of boredom is healthy. There's a whole Dutch philosophy called Nixon, where it's like, it's good to be bored because it makes you more productive. Problem is that there's no balance in that, and the key word is balance, because if you're bored all the time, which I kind of was, it just led to boredom and frustration. And so is it cool to just go out there on your own and on your bikes and not come home and just not, and like having that freedom to know that nobody knows where you are and you can kind of do what you want to do? Yeah. at the same time, you don't want to take it too far to where, you can get yourself killed, you can get yourself hurt if you get lost somewhere and you don't know where you are, and you don't have a GPS, or you don't have a phone to call, and you gotta walk in freezing weather. Cell phones could save your life as well. So I am very much a product of the 80s. Its advantages and disadvantages, but I am not one to paint it as a broad brush, as an either or, as something that was like the best, and these kids today have to really get back to what it was when I was a kid because I'm tough, or the worst, to where it's like, well, I mean, the fashion was pretty bad and the haircuts were terrible, but I'm not going to paint it as it was hell on earth being in the 80s. It did have problems. I think the culture was a lot meaner, especially to the most vulnerable out there. Just speaking for, just about LGBTQ people being most likely heavily in the closet, because if someone were to come out, they would just be ridiculed and scorned. I just remember growing up, the different sayings, like using the F word for gay people thrown about, just as being that you're weak, because being gay meant you were that you were weak back then. There was there was an equivalence of those two words, and that's what society was like. So as time goes on, just speaking just about LGBTQ people, it's gotten less worse, and there's still such a long way to go, but you can see the progress. That progress needs to change overnight. It's unfortunately not, but it's getting there. There's that forward momentum, 2 steps backward, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, 4 steps forward. It's never, if ever, a straight line. But back to Action Park, I was there once in 1991, and I remember going, it's like, oh, okay, cool, slides, but even, how old was I? How old was I in 1990? Oh my God, I got to do math. I was like 14. So even back then, I'm like, well, I'm not going on that big slide where you can almost fall off, and I'm not going on that loop-to-loop slide, because even back then, I'm like, what are the physics involved with that? I don't want to get stuck, or I don't want to break my neck. And I did go in the wave pool, which I found was dangerous. I knew how to swim. I was a pretty good not a bad swimmer, but I did. There were instances where I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting really tired in this wave pool, and I made it out. I think I was on the Tarzan swing. I don't remember it, but that was something I would have been on. I did jump off that 20-foot cliff, which was pretty scary. I was afraid I was going to slip off that cliff. Meanwhile, there was nobody. No lifeguards were saying, you can go. There's people clear. People were just kind of swimming. I didn't land on anyone, and no one landed on me, but I remember jumping off that, and it took a long time to fall. And then when I hit feet first. I felt like a sting. And I did follow the rules where I was like, my arms were fine because my arms were tucked in, so that wasn't bad. I did go in Cannonball Falls, which was weird because I remember it being very fast and very dark and not knowing when I was going to go out of it. It was very, very fast. And then once I got launched out, I was fine. And then I remember after I got off the ride, like we were just kind of standing around looking at people, being shot out of the slide. And I remember a woman who was able to, I don't know how she did it, but slow herself down on the slide, and then she was sitting on the lip of the slide, so I'm going, oh my God, somebody's gonna crash into her and like blast her in the back, and she's gonna be hurt. And then the lifeguard was like, what are you doing? And she says, I can't swim. So so the lifeguard said, well, jump in the water and I'll go get you. And the woman jumped in the water, lifeguard dove in and got her out. And I'm thinking, if you don't know how to swim, why would you go on the slide? I remember going on the Alpine Slide, and I did the Alpine Slide really, really, really slow. So no injuries on the Alpine Slide, and it wasn't fun because I'm like, I'm not going fast on this thing because I don't want to. I didn't even think of like breaking my neck or anything. There were no helmets or anything like that, but I didn't want to get that road rash that would just take forever to heal, and it would be very, very painful. So I'm like, let me go slow on this. So that wasn't fun. It was just, going and braking responsibly. And then we went on that big raft ride, and I went with a bunch of people. I went with people in my family and some friends, and we that was weird, because I remember one person that we were with kept getting up on the raft and moving to the other side, and we were yelling at him, and that was somewhat manageable going down that. And I remember the single raft ride, where it was just a bottleneck of people, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because someone could have been hurt. I was able to navigate through that, and I was okay. I left Action Park without any injuries. And it was just a place where I'm like, okay, I was there. I really had no desire to go back again. I'm a big amusement park guy. I love Six Flags. I love roller coasters. And I think one of the things I like about them is the balance of, it's a thrill ride, but at the same time, it's safe. Action Park, there wasn't any safety there. And then I didn't even realize the human element that was involved. Like I said, I was there once, and I felt, I didn't maybe when at the time there weren't any miscreants there or whatever, or if there were, I didn't see any, but there was that human element where it's like, people are getting wasted, and parents included, and along with the kids, and I can do whatever I want, and then, just wreaking havoc, and again, with no consequences, and really not much accountability. The only the consequences were people being injured, and, I felt angry watching some of the old employees just kind of laughing about it now, and I understand the duality of, the Mulvihill could have been this really sleazy, terrible guy, and at the same time, he was a very likable guy, and if you're a kid, you're very impressionable, but even as an adult, I think even looking back, would have been like, I don't know about this guy. It's like that argument where it's like, oh, well, he's nice to me. He's nice to me. As long as he's nice to me, it's okay. And so there's that nuance where it's like, well, if he's nice to me, it's all right. But at the same time, he wasn't really nice to the state. He wasn't really nice to the family members. And he could have made the park safe. And he chose not to. And then I found it telling at the end they were trying to bring some nuance into Mulvihill, where you had the editor who sued him. And she said, I looked at all the charities that he gave to, and you saw the quote by Chris Christie, of all people, saying, oh, he's a very generous man. And call me cynical. I think sometimes that people give a lot of money to charity, and even though that money could help, it's almost used as a cover for any bad thing that they do. It's like, or as an excuse, or something that can excuse that bad behavior, and I don't think that's right. I think if you want to give to charity, that's fine. The money is going to help. At the same time, your bad behavior needs to be atoned for as well. Whether it's through the justice system, or if you're not caught up in that, at least try and, through actual behavior and action and kindness and compassion, you can evolve from what you were. And I think in the spirit of evolution, which is what the documentary kind of ended on, was that, looking back on it, it's like, yeah, I look at my childhood, but it's both. It's looking back on, you kind of relish the freedom now, but at the same time, it's like, what was I thinking? I could have been killed, or one of my friends could have been killed. And then it's trying to live within that balance. And yeah, you learn from those things. You learn from the rule breaking, and you learn from the mischief, and you learn what boundaries can be pushed, and you learn, well, maybe what's considered mischievous now will be considered normal. I mean, mischievous then will be considered normal now, and it's pushing using the phrase the Overton window. What's acceptable and what's not, and it's just constantly changing. All the while, the one generation will scorn any other generation before them, or any other different generation, really. But yeah, it was just a very I thought the documentary was well made. it was kind of one-sided against Mulvihill, but I philosophically speaking, I am against people like Mulvihill. So personally, I didn't have a problem with it. It's sometimes I've railed against documentaries that are kind of infomercials. At the same time, I don't mind documentaries that are advocacy pieces. And Class Action Park wasn't an infomercial, and it was a little bit of an advocacy piece on consequences and on the danger of deregulation. We saw it in Texas with that terrible winter storm where people died because the power grid wasn't regulated. So there is, and it's like these faux rebels that are like, we don't need government because we're rebels, until they get into trouble, then they ask for the government. So it's hypocrisy, or they have the means to override whatever damages, so if their house freezes, they can afford a hotel for a little bit, or they can, hop in a car and go to a friend's house and stay there because they have the means to do it. So it's it's some people can't pull themselves up by their bootstraps because they don't have any shoes, so give them some boots, and then maybe you can make the argument for bootstraps, but at least give him some boots. So, but yeah, it was a nostalgia trip. I'm not a fan of nostalgia, not really. When I go back there, it kind of reminds me of, it can remind me of the bad times I've had back then, which I don't want to think about. But then